I want to take this opportunity to introduce everyone to my colleague, Dorothea Williams. Dorothea has been doing consulting in the education environment for over 20 years. She has worked with so many school districts, teachers, and students. We're going to cover a lot of that during our conversation. But first off, Dorothea, let me say welcome and thank you for spending some time with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Darcel, and thank you for the invitation.
We're partners, and we've got this real commitment around educational excellence, and we're talking about generationally having educational excellence. And I wanted to bring the various members of our team together and have conversations so that the people that we really want to reach out and touch can get a better sense of who we are. So this is my opportunity to do a bit of a profile of Dorothea, to talk a little bit about who she is and what the story is. And let's just go to the beginning. What was it that first attracted you? Because you were in that generation where people aspired to be educated. What was it that attracted you to education as a profession?
Originally, I wasn't attracted to it until I became a classroom aide. And then when I realized the power of an effective, compassionate teacher, and then started reflecting on my own life of those who were in my world and space that were teachers, I realized, this may be something I want to do. I wasn't sure that I would be in it long term. But as each year passed, I got more vested, even though I thought I wouldn't have, because I started this journey as a classroom aide at 18. So I certainly didn't foresee that somewhere in my 60s, I'd still be doing this.
Right.
I thought I'd be doing something else or may have had two or three careers. But what I have found is that it's very rewarding. And when you have the experience of watching the face of a student light up when they get something, when they know that they know it. There's nothing that can replace that. So I think that's what got me hooked and stuck.
And it's interesting because I was going to ask you what were two or three things that really made it fulfilling. I guess you've given me one. Is there something else in particular that has really kept you in the profession in terms of being very meaningful from a professional point of view?
Yes, and realizing that when I was being educated during that time, excellence was expected. Academic excellence was expected, whether you were in private school, public school, it did not matter. And there was no ceiling on what you were able to do or where you could go if you put in the work academically. There was a sense that you could get fulfillment. And watching my mother as an educator, seeing how she was in the high school space, I was in the elementary. I wanted to be more towards the beginning of the journey for students than at the end of their journey. But watching how you traverse all of that and realizing that I had a lot of people in my educational experience that expected me to do well and supported me in doing well.
Yeah.
As time went on in my career, I realized that there was a shift that occurred. I can't put my finger on when it happened, but there seemingly was a shift that we were no longer focused on academic excellence, but somewhere academics seemed to fade. And that has always concerned me because I thought for sure at this point, I would see all kids being able to fulfill their dreams academically, and that there wouldn't be a question of if kids could read.
Mm.
And now I'm in that space of what do you mean kids aren't reading and able to understand the material that they're reading at a given grade level?
Well, before we jump, and I do want to get into some of those challenges, walk us through your progression of your career from, I guess you said, teacher's aide into teaching and then beyond.
Yeah, I started off as a classroom aide. That was many years ago when elementary classrooms had teachers' aides in them. Then while enrolled in college, finished my undergrad and realized that I was going to go on and become a teacher. That was going to be my first career and wanted to be an elementary teacher. Did that I was in the classroom for about 17, 18 years. I had a variety of experiences. I worked in a large school district, LAUSD. I was in Inglewood. I moved to Texas. I taught in Texas, came back, taught in San Bernardino. And somewhere along there, probably a year into it, I decided, I think I might want to look at special education also. So I worked on my special ed master's and did some work in special ed classrooms as well. Then realized I really wanted to spend more time in general ed and support kids who were in a general ed class and also receiving special ed services. Did that for quite a while, then went into school administration, enjoyed that. And about year 18 or 19 is when I left a traditional school district and started working as an educational consultant and did that for 3 or 4 years before starting with my partner, Cheryl Hightower at the time, A to Z Educational Consultants.
I'm curious, what was the transition that attracted you to consulting and to step away from being within the school?
Realizing that there were some constraints that schools had on them that perhaps consultants didn't have. Throughout my career, I've received a lot of professional development and enjoyed that, thought I would enjoy that type of work and wanted to be able to see schools from a different perspective. So that led me into the world of educational consulting. And that's kind of where I've been the last 20 years.
And kind of talk me through the basics of what you've done in the consulting space. So, as an education consultant, what has that meant?
We started in Indianapolis with Indianapolis Public Schools. And at the time, the superintendent was concerned about how their middle schools were transitioning kids into high school. And he felt that the performance level was not the same as the performance level of students in the elementary program. So we started working on how do we close that achievement gap and what are the barriers that are affecting students being able to traverse that space? Where are they losing their interests? What was happening with the curriculum that they were not able to manage it as well? And what was happening instructionally in the classroom? And prior to that's when I started with A to Z. That was one of our first contracts. But before that, I had worked with the Pulliam Group, and they were looking at how to close that achievement gap for students of color in large urban districts. And why was the achievement gap so great and what was necessary in order to close that gap? And so that's where my first work started in the space of educational consulting.
When I think about the time that we have talked about education or consulting, because obviously I came from a business environment, there's been a shift where the work that you have done over the years, going in and improving schools has not stuck. I'll just say it doesn't seem to stick anymore. You've gone into the same district multiple times attempting to make a correction and it just doesn't stick. Is there a moment in time where it became clear that was a real issue? And if you can take us to that moment in time or a situation where it was just clear that, hey, I know how to move these teachers to higher performance. I know how to move the school to higher performance, but the ability for it to sustain became a real issue.
I think one of the things I noticed in doing this work is when there is a shift in the leadership, when new superintendents come in, the initiatives can change. And when that changes, that can either derail, it's like we start all over again. I think that's where I noticed that schools that were making great progress seem to be derailed and take another turn. I think when we were speaking on several occasions, we talked about the need for coherence and the need for sustainability. And when you don't have that, I think that's when you start to see mm, the shift in our focus because teachers aren't real clear any longer on what do you want me to focus on? Is my real focus on teaching and learning? We all know there was a major shift that occurred when COVID hit. We were not prepared as an industry, in my opinion, for moving to online teaching. Most teachers became new teachers again, learning how to teach online, which is a different strategy and a whole different approach than teaching with students in the classroom. Prior to that, you were seeing slippage as it related to academic achievement and performance of students, and that the gap was widening. And as we had Common Core standards institutionalized across the country, though it brought coherence in the curriculum, what you were still seeing was the gap was getting wider. And how do we close that gap? But when you're working in a district and the superintendent has one direction and a new superintendent comes in and changes that direction, everything seems to restart as opposed to continuing and enhancing the work. Sometimes we have a whole restart of what we're going to do. We may be implementing new programs, new initiatives that weren't in place prior. So we have to adjust to that. In any implementation phase, there's always a learning curve. And sometimes that learning curve can set us back.
No, you definitely answered the question. What I think is really important, and when I want to talk specifically, because you really spend your time with teachers in terms of their ability to effectively deliver the content. When you talk about the shifts in superintendents, or you talk about the shifts, I like to talk about the shifts in school boards as the starting point, and you want to bring some continuity to that process, right? If you could speak from the perspective of the teacher and say, man, here's what teachers would really like senior leadership to understand about the challenges that they're confronted with because of the changes in superintendents, or because of the changes in focus, or because of, if you can speak from that teacher's point of view based upon the time you spent with them, what would they be encouraging or asking senior leadership to do within a district?
I think what I've heard teachers say over and over, I can do 2 or 3 things well, but I need to know what those 2 or 3 things are, and let me master it first before you throw something else at. And so it seems like oftentimes they are having several initiatives come in, more than 2 or 3 in a school year, and then they always feel like they're constantly pivoting with the thought and the notion that perhaps senior leadership does not understand the type of student that they're now teaching. What I hear from veteran teachers of 20 years plus, the students that they started teaching or the type of student they were teaching 20 years ago is not the same student we have in the classroom today. And teachers who've been teaching since COVID or prior to COVID, all of them say the same thing. Our students have shifted and their attention has shifted, ability to focus on things long term has shifted, and knowing how to bridge that gap. And some teachers are very successful at it. They have been able to build those relationships and take students from where they are with a very focused intention of this is where I'm taking them, realizing that it's going to be a gradual consistent step-by-step process, and they're able to get kids across the finish line. But we also have a teaching force that about a third of them are new teachers. And so they haven't mastered teaching yet, and they're learning how to deliver instruction effectively, but they may not have mastered it at this point and have challenges with it. And what I hear from them, as well as some of the other veterans, is everybody does not seem to agree on what discipline should look like in the classroom. And so if they have challenged students in the classroom, oftentimes they feel they don't have enough support with that, or that they're not going to get the support from administration that they need in order to be successful.
One of the things that I want to point out that you distinctly are an advocate for, I'll even go so far as to say dismissive of the other perspective, is the notion that you should blame a child for not being successful.
Oh, yeah.
The notion that every child deserves that opportunity. So I want you to speak to that core perspective because there are a lot of folks who are quick to want to blame the child for their inability to be successful.
I just subscribe to the notion, particularly for elementary students. I'm just 8. I have to live where my parents say I have to live. I have to do what they say. I don't control how I get to school. So, yes, I'd like to be on time, but if they don't get me there on time, I can't get there. So, it's not my fault as a student. Do I think there are students who know, and in spite of knowing right from wrong, choose to make some poor decisions? Absolutely. I do believe that that's true. But I think that's true for all of us when we look at our childhood over time. I don't think it's my fault that I have had new teachers every single year, or I didn't have a licensed or certificated or certified teacher. That's not my fault as a student. And whether they had the experience, the knowledge, or the expertise, I should not be penalized that I'm not successful, even though I showed up for 184 days of instruction. And if I showed up, the question is, how are you going to deliver that instruction to me in a way that I'm able to get it, especially in the area of mathematics? I do believe that it's important that kids see it multiple ways. And oftentimes, if you are limited as a teacher and you don't know how to teach a concept in multiple ways, then me as the student, I may not get it the way you taught it to me. But is there another way to deliver that to me so that I can grasp the concept and move forward with it? And looking at how we schedule time, or do we have enough time? I know you've heard me have the conversation with you repeatedly about when we go back to our elementary experiences, we had about the same amount of time in school. However, they don't seem to be able to do the same kinds of things that we did as elementary students. And they always seem to fall short of time. I hear from teachers often there's not enough time to do what we need to do. And the question is, are we doing things that are ineffective or not as efficient or effective for students to be able to grasp concepts that we really want them to know and understand deeply?
I guess I'd ask you, which one is it? I mean, what would be your take on what that issue is?
I think sometimes we have shifted from what the goal of the job is, which is to teach. So I do think it's critical for teachers to build relationships with students. That's just part of teaching. However, we can't do everything. We can't be the social worker. We can't be the nurse. We can't be the doctor. We can't be the nutritionist. What is it that you really want me to do? and allow me to be focused on that and doing that well and having support in doing that well. Restorative circles are important, absolutely. But do I think that is what the teacher needs to do? Right now, my answer would be no. I'm not sure that's the job of the teacher. Those teachers who know how to embed that naturally into their instructional practice, great. But those who don't know how to do that, I'd rather them be focused on the fundamentals of one, knowing the content and knowing how to teach it to students so you have the greatest catch the first time. Good first time. There's nothing that beats good first time teaching.
I love it. So, as we talk about this evolution that brought us all together to work on the legacy sustainable success framework, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the kind of aha moments that have come together. And our colleague Daryl Kleinke has brought kind of systems thinking into the process. How the two of us have looked at culture, talk about culture and people, and having that common unwavering purpose in terms of where the district needs to be, something that does not, whereby they don't deviate. So you may change superintendents, but where we're headed has to remain kind of in alignment. So let me start by talking about Daryl and systems thinking. Daryl and his approach to systems in terms of how he would integrate systems into a school system. When he kind of laid out his philosophy, his approach, what was your reaction to that? Was there any skepticism around it? And kind of what has brought you to the notion that bringing a business focus of systems approach, he's a former Ford engineer and a professor of engineering. What is it that kind of allowed you to take that over the hump and say, yeah, man, this really can work in our environment?
When he started talking about his experiences at Ford and when they realized that they were going to be put out of business if they did not compete with their competitors across the waters in Japan and other parts of the world. And when they had to realize that they were going to have to make a hard pivot and make a decision that there's certain things they were not going to do, period. I got very intrigued with the notion of if you know that there is a defect or a flaw, you need to stop the line and fix it. And when I think about teachers that I have either worked with or have known through the years, we talk about that oftentimes. How did you get out of this grade not knowing this? How in the world could you be in the eighth grade and reading at a fourth grade level or a third grade level? I mean, how is it you don't understand fractions when we know that they've been in the curriculum just about from the time kids were in K or one? And so that's when I was like, okay, well, maybe we haven't thought about this in the same way. Do I believe teachers haven't thought about it? No. I think all groups have thought about it. Of course, the district has thought about that and want that to happen. But what I realized around systems thinking that Daryl clearly articulated for me is that we have to be clear that everybody understands where we're headed, no matter what. And we're not deviating from that. And so it doesn't matter whether you are the custodian, if you are the gardener, if you are the crossing guard, if you are the school secretary, if you're the teacher, if you the paraprofessional, it matters not. Everybody is clear on what our purpose is and what our direction is and where your particular job fits in there. And for me, started thinking about it and I said, well, are we really that clear? Because I've spoken with several superintendents and assistant supes. Do they know where they're headed? Absolutely. I've heard board members talk about where they believe the district is headed. I've heard principals talk about it, and I've heard teachers talk about it. But is that really what we're doing? And is everybody on that same page? And so when it came to systems thinking, I was like, huh, that might be where we're having part of our challenge.
Yeah.
In talking to you from through the years, and particularly in the last couple of years, from a business perspective, what I really realized is when I thought of my career early on, do I understand the role of the superintendent sitting from the seat sitting in now? Absolutely, I get it. They have huge responsibility. But when I was first teaching, did I understand it? Did I know who my superintendent was? Did I know what their focus and purpose was? Did I understand their vision? Was I involved in vision statements at the school site level? Absolutely, did all of that. But did I internalize it as a teacher? And I have no knowledge of any of that as a paraprofessional when I was an aide in a classroom. So I realized then again, Daryl's notion around systems and thinking and understanding how it penetrates every aspect of the organization, I got real clear. Then in talking to you about just funding and money and those kinds of things, and realizing I never saw the entire time until I shifted to being a consultant probably, or in the latter years of my ex work as a district leader, did I ever consider education as a business? And realizing that there are operational decisions that have to be made for a business in order for that business to stay healthy. And so, yes, would I want this particular school to stay open, not realizing that, yes, it was built for 1,500, there are only 200 in it. And does it make sense to turn on the lights and the gas?
No.
And the answer gets to be no. But I never thought of it, but I thought of it from the perspective of being either a community member or seeing the importance for kids to be able to be in their neighborhood schools, but not realizing that that has a profound effect. And when I'm screaming that I think I should be paid more, well, where do you want the money to come from? Because there's a set amount of money. And either I understand it or not, because I didn't have to worry about my salary. Once I signed my contract, I knew how much money I was going to make. I knew what my annual raises were going to be and or my step increases, but never realizing from an operational side what the superintendent's office had to manage. I never thought about that.
Yeah. Coming back to the Daryl conversation for a second, the thing I loved, and it can apply in school district or any place else, but he said it's related to a defect. Don't accept it, don't create it, or don't pass it on.
That's right.
If you don't accept mediocrity, if you're not generating mediocrity, and if you're not passing on mediocrity, you can have generational excellence in any business. And I thought that it was such a simple phrase that, which is
And
why
that's
Ford went from being
profound.
mediocre, building a mediocre product to a superior product.
I think also one of the things that I know I was guilty of is of thinking prior to where I am now in my life in understanding of things in business is that I never saw students as a product or a commodity. And realizing that, yes, if we want excellence for them, we're going to have to make sure that we are delivering excellence, that we're in a space of excellence. Teachers have to have a mindset of excellence, not only for their students, but for themselves. You can't, I'm a strong believer, and you can't convey something you don't believe yourself and see in yourself. So it causes me to wonder, did we have a sliding or shift in our beliefs about what is possible for students that has led us to where we are now?
It does feel like there's an acceptance of mediocrity if you've got 20+% of the districts in the United States that have failing schools, it would lead you to conclude that since it hasn't changed, there's a disconnect that is not being addressed. So let me ask you this question. You a little bit answered it earlier. But I want to maybe really zero in on it is you've been in plenty of districts that have invested a lot of money in a new initiative and seen very little benefit. Walk me through what's that like to be inside of a district, inside a school. You see they're spending meaningful money on something that they believe will benefit, but then it doesn't really translate into something. And so then what was the investment for?
I've seen hundreds, possibly thousands of people working really hard, but I'm not sure we're always working effectively and efficiently. The notion of purpose resonates with me more and more every day. Are we clear about what our purpose is? And do we have the resources allocated in a place that ensures that we're going to be able to meet the measurables or the outcomes based on what our purpose is? And I think what happens is we get busy trying to do a lot of things and we're not doing a few things. I think we need to start doing some things very well before we move on to the next thing and make sure that they're embedded or institutionalized before moving on to the next thing.
So let me, I just got a couple more other questions for you. I want to talk about specifically the legacy framework. So we built this model with three simple ideas that if you have quality systems, you build excellent playbooks, and you have simple scorecards, going back to the whole notion around purpose, why do you see what is it that in your mind just makes that the ability for that to click within a district? Why is breaking it down in that way in your mind be thinking that can be very effective to generate generation excellence?
Well, I think it starts to be easy for everybody to follow because no matter what your division is, if you have a playbook and you're clear about how that playbook aligns to the purpose, and we have scorecards that everybody can understand, the layperson, in my opinion, starting in sixth grade, kids ought to be able to understand it. If not sooner, they should be able to understand what do the numbers mean and what does this say about where we are, and they may not be able to understand all of the nuances in a playbook, but the playbook should be written in plain language that we all can follow and that we're very clear about. And when we take our measures, we know what we're measuring. And we have to be realistic about what the outcomes are. We may look at the barriers. I'm not saying that barriers won't be there. We're going to face some headwinds. We're going to face some storms in the process, but we've got to be very clear about what it is we want to do and accomplish. And did we do it? And if not, what do we need to do differently? And not necessarily have it as an add on, the new thing that we're going to do. Because when you ask me the question, what do I hear teachers talk about? They oftentimes will talk about how their plates are piled high and nothing ever comes off the plate. You keep putting more on, but you're never taking anything out. So we're going to have to edit some of the stuff we're doing. If it's not effective and it's not working, we don't need to do it anymore. And we're going to have to take a hard stance on that. And yes, it may be what Dorothea thinks is absolutely critical and important. However, if our numbers don't show that, and we cannot show that we are getting gains with it, this may not be the time to do it. And I'm going to have to accept that as a leader or whatever my role is in the system. I've got to accept that because ultimately I'm trying to move the district forward or be a part of what moves the district forward for generational excellence.
So here's my last question. We created the Legacy Sustainable Success Framework with the fundamental goal of transforming the school system, whereby generational excellence is the norm. talking to school board and superintendents and the cabinet, what is the message that you want them to walk away with? What is it that you want them to understand about what legacy is about, where we truly believe that our educational system can go? What is it that you want them to know about what we're doing in our commitment, your commitment? Forget about your commitment to what it is that we're looking to get accomplished here.
This is achievable. And I know that it can happen. And we can use all of the catchphrases, keep hope alive, all of that. But I think we have to be positive in the belief. I believe in the kids, the generation of kids that are coming next, that they can get it done. But we have to stay the course and we have to be clear about what we want. And we cannot lose our vision for excellence in that it is possible. And every student can deliver excellence to their fullest, whatever ability they're able to do it. But we have to be focused on it. We can't get overwhelmed by the storms that hit us because they're going to hit us. They're coming. There are going to be storms. There are going to be financial storms. There's going to be natural storms. I mean, that's going to happen. Life is going to continue to happen. But that does not mean that we cannot be successful and that our kids cannot be successful. And I just know that no one ever gave up on me, and I'm not willing to give up on the generations to come.
Dorothea, thanks so much. And for those listening, if you want more of her tremendous insights, that's what we've built here. There obviously be information to link and talk to us about what's going on in your district. We have multiple ways that you can continue to follow what we're saying, as well as engage us in conversations and how we might help you all. And so, Dorothea, thanks. Appreciate you. And to the audience, thanks for listening.